Okay, so let's get into it. What is controlled vocabulary and why bother? In theory, controlled vocabulary is supposed to be something that reconciles the fact that lots of different authors can use lots of different terminology to refer to the same exact concept or the same exact topic. So when it comes time for doing things like searching in a scholarly database, how do you know which words to use in order to get the best results? Controlled vocabulary is meant to solve that problem, but I feel like controlled vocabulary isn't a very good name for it, because I feel like not a lot of people necessarily know what controlled vocabulary means, but we're all actually somewhat familiar with it, whether we know it or not. Can I have a few examples of controlled vocabulary you might use nearly day-to-day, scholarly or otherwise? Any responses, Emily?
Oh, someone said keywords in the chat. Mesh, awesome.
Excellent.
I was thinking like when you're shopping on Amazon and there's like categories. I don't know if that counts.
Yes, it certainly does. That's an excellent example. So one of the examples I was going to bring to light was when we are using whatever interface it is. Woo, these things are triggered. All right, whatever interface we use, say when we're streaming movies or videos or something like that, we're probably familiar with things like action, adventure, family or kids, suspense, and horror. But already you're probably aware that different platforms actually want you to use different terms for the same, or maybe the same thing. Like, is a thriller the same as suspense, or is kids the same as family? Who knows? Usually there's some indication with the interface of the platform, but this is something that you correct for when you, let's say, when you hop from Hulu to Netflix or Netflix to Amazon. And same thing happens when you go from database or database. The same terms aren't always the term that's best to use. So apparently this is Confucius. Don't hold me to that. The beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name. The tricky thing is, who decides what the proper name is? And naming things greatly impacts how accessible they are. And I think we experience that every time we start searching in a database. So often it depends on where you are. And in a scholarly situation, where is usually the different databases. I'm going to tell a quick little story about my experience with controlled vocabulary, and it might be the reason I'm semi-obsessed with it. We moved a bunch as a kid when I was a kid, and at one particular location, I was visiting a friend, and their mom offered us a Pepsi. And she's like, "What kind do you want?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what kind do I want?" She's like, "Do you want Sprite? Do you want Orange Crush? Do you want," oh. So in that location, Pepsi was how everybody referred to soda pop or Coke, or you get the picture. So when it comes to the scholarly databases, they can't even decide on what to call their controlled vocabulary, which is kind of ironic. So here's just a small selection. CINAHL calls their controlled vocabulary subject headings. Embase calls it Emtree. PsycInfo calls it thesaurus. PubMed calls it MESH. Some of you are already familiar with that. But Web of Science and Scopus do not have controlled vocabulary. And in this case, I think it's often helpful to maybe dabble in one of the databases that does have controlled vocabulary if you're really having trouble zeroing in on terms that are getting you what you want. So I'm going to go out and visit some of these databases just so you can get a sense for how the interfaces differ, even though they're basically doing the same thing over and over again. In each setting, there are ways to check the meaning of the term to make sure it means what we think it means or what we hope it means. And in some databases, it's not uncommon for there to be more than one controlled vocabulary term for the topic. And you may want to collect some or all of these, or you may find that just one specific one narrows in on what you want to get at. Initially, the process can feel extremely tedious, but if you stick with it, it actually will make searching move along quite a bit faster after you've got enough terms to start zeroing in on your literature. So let's start looking around. Can you see the library homepage? Emily?
Yep. Sorry, I was nodding. Yes, we can see it.
Nod louder. No. So here's the library homepage. And I'm going to go straight to the databases section. And I'm not going to visit all of the databases that I included in that list, but let's go to a few. First, I'm going to go to Embase. And Embase has Emtree. I feel as though I wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards this button unless I had learned in advance that Emtree is how I get to the controlled vocabulary. So here it is. I'm going to click on Emtree and I'm going to start searching for terms that hopefully I'll be able to grab or collect in order to build my search string. So I'm going to start here with carbonated beverages. Yay. Whoops. Lidocaine. Oops. And this was very straightforward. I'm going to go look at my results so that you understand what's happening on a separate page. And I'm going to actually delete that. Sorry, let's do that again. All right, so I'm not particularly interested in searching through 3,000 things, but I am interested in beginning a search history where at first, not forever, but at first, I'm going to layer in each of my terms in its own line. And that will make combining them later much more fast. It also allows me to see which terms, say I put in a term that the results are quite small, I'm going to know I'm probably needing to look for an alternate term. Back to Emtree. Okay, I'm going to look for diabetes. And many of us are aware there are lots of different kinds of diabetes. I'm going to choose diabetes mellitus. And I'm going to go look at those results. And as I said, this can seem kind of tedious, but now I can actually start combining a bit and see what's going on. So I'm going to click on these two terms, which are subject headings, and combine with and I'm getting 235 results. Now, if I were to search with keywords, meaning I simply started typing into the search field without going to Emtree, I would probably get many, many more results. But by using Emtree, it zeroes in and makes sure that this term is an important part or a major part of the discussion in the article. Do we have any questions so far? Great. I will demonstrate once we move forward what a big difference it can mean, bouncing between things like keywords or natural language terms versus subject headings or the controlled vocabulary that we find when we use the thesaurus, or in this case, Emtree. So let's go back into the databases. And now I'm going to take a look at CINAHL. You're going to see things look pretty familiar. However, once again, the controlled vocabulary is called something that I need to know in advance. Here in CINAHL, it's called subject headings. And so the steps are pretty much the same. Let's look for diabetes. And again, we are faced with many different choices. This is nice because it means that I can probably get specific. For example, if I only want to learn about diabetes mellitus type 2, this here lets me know that diabetes mellitus on its own is what I should use in terms of it being the broadest, most general term. And over here are scope notes. And these help to reassure me that the term I'm selecting is the term that I want, that it means what I want it to mean. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose diabetes mellitus type 2. And I'm going to explode. And what that means is that we'll be accessing, oh, guess not. We'll be accessing, if there are other divisions of that topic underneath it, we would be able to collect those as well. Okay, so here we have 55,000 results. I'm not terribly interested in looking over 55,000 results. So I'm going to clear my field and head back over to CINAHL subject headings and do it again for the next portion of my search. And I might try soda. No, not helpful. Carbonated beverage, carbonated beverages. Interesting. It's always good to look at the context that's offered in terms of similar terms, because right now I'm noticing, for example, sweetened beverages, alcoholic beverages, beverages in general, meaning if I'm primarily concerned with soda pop, I'm going to be curious about exactly what they mean by sweetened beverages. And that's somewhat helpful. I might want to collect it along with other terms. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose carbonated beverage and search. And earlier I spoke to wanting to collect more than one of the terms, even if they're referring possibly to the same thing. And in this case, I'm also going to take up sweetened beverages. Now, I realize this is not terribly exciting, but the reason I'm doing each of these on its own is I'm actually capturing these terms in the search history, which we're going to look at now. And with the search history, I can build variables and start searching similarly as to what you saw me do in Mtree. But in this case, I'm going to use these two words, sweetened beverages and carbonated beverages, to create a variable for my beverages. So I'm going to click on S2 and S3, and I'm going to search with or. That way, now that that search has created S4, instead of having to search twice with diabetes mellitus carbonated beverages and diabetes mellitus sweetened beverages, I'm just going to search for those combined terms and proceed combining it with diabetes mellitus, and I'm going to search with and. Alrighty. Here are our results. And when I think about accessing 78 results, that seems like a nice tidy number. I'm not overly overwhelmed by 78 results. I'm not going to go in depth regarding how to search each of these particular databases. I'm really going to kind of skate on the surface of each one for the sake of just visiting the controlled vocabulary functions in the user interface. But if 78 was too many, obviously I could do things like adjust my publication date or adjust aspects of my population here. So let's keep moving and let's visit PubMed. PubMed, you can actually get to via this button instead of having to mine through the database list. You always want to access PubMed via the library's homepage instead of just going to, say, pubmed.gov, because that will let you click on through to the full text most conveniently. Now, in PubMed, what was called a thesaurus or Embase, Mtree, or subject headings is called MESH. And MESH stands for medical subject headings. And similar to what we've already witnessed, it's kind of almost like an app within the database that we're going to use, as we did previously, to find the best search terms to build our search string. So I need to get to MESH. And I'm starting over. And I think it's always good to try and gamify your approach whenever you're beginning the task of collecting subject headings or your MESH term, whatever the controlled vocabulary is called, because as we've seen, sometimes it's beverage, sometimes it's carbonated beverages. And here I'm even able to use the term soda. And again, carbonated water here is distinct from carbonated beverages. Interesting. And down below, again, we have a separate category, sugar sweetened beverages. And so if I want to double check on the meanings for these items, I'm going to visit the record page. In carbonated beverage, interesting, I get this quip, this, barely a sentence here. My entry terms here help me understand or feel better about collecting this term to start building my search string. And these do indeed cover the topic I'm trying to get at. So in order to quote unquote capture this term to build my search string, I'm going to go to add to search builder and search PubMed. Again, we're starting off with this somewhat tedious approach. And if I click on this advanced button here, I get to a search history, just like we were able to look at a search history in Embase and in CINAHL. I'm not interested in going through 3,000 results, but I am interested in going back to Mesh and getting the next part of my search string. Now, through our travels across the different databases, we've become more and more aware how there are many different categories of diabetes, but I'm going to stick with generalized diabetes, but I am still going to go look at the record, because you may have noticed when we were looking at Emtree, and here you can find your term is like nestled within context of other terms. Sometimes this is exciting because if you didn't enter, like you didn't look for a term, for example, diabetes gestational, finding it here instead of just the generalized diabetes mellitus would be great. I would choose it and start searching with that instead of the more general term, because it would narrow down my results quite a bit. So I'm going to add it to search builder and search PubMed. I'm going to go back to advanced because that's what my search history is. Now, I know this is kind of tedious work, but the beauty of it is that you're going to get far fewer search results that are far more relevant versus using a keyword search. And I'll demonstrate that as well. So if I go and enter a term here, I'm just going to do, say, a keyword search. $800,000 results is clearly much. I mean, that's completely overwhelming. I do not want to deal with 800,000 results. The same would happen if I simply put in carbonated beverages or soda or pop. When I was looking at the carbonated beverages record earlier, and we noticed those entry terms, we know that PubMed is going to go out and scoop up all those different permutations that were listed there so that I don't have to type them all in when I'm using carbonated beverages. So here in PubMed, I'm going to hover and I'm going to say add query, and it gets add to the query box here. I'm going to do the same here, but here I'm going to ask it to add with and search. Again, I'm pretty happy with 115 results because I haven't even used my filters, for example, maybe a 5-year window of time or a specific population of people. 26 results is very tidy. Are there any questions so far?
Jeannie, there was a question in the chat. This might have come up when you were searching CINAHL, but Amaya asked, what is the difference with searching with and versus or?
Oh, I'd be happy to answer that. So, or is both items combined together into buckets. And I can demonstrate how that looks here. So if I want something that has diabetes mellitus or carbonated beverages, it's to combine those results straight up. So it's going to look like those two things added together. And this blue number lets us know that that is what's happened. But when we use and we did that earlier, what it does is it only gives us the articles where both of those items are an important part of the discussion in the paper. And so if you had a Venn diagram, it would be parts of the circle that overlap one another. And so you're getting fewer when you use and you're generally always getting more when you use or. Any other questions?
We have one that just came in and it says, what is the best way to save a search in case you have to go back later and not have to look through all the terms again? That's from Ebony.
I love that you asked that. So again, each of the interfaces are somewhat different, but they all have that feature. They all allow you to save your search history and or save a specific search. Now, this often entails logging into an account. I highly recommend, if you are getting cozy with a particular database, or you're starting to recognize that I use these two or this one or these three, creating accounts creates, I mean, it's a huge advantage. I think it's totally worth the time because, for example, in PubMed, it will have, oh, pardon me. Let's just stick here. It will have recorded all of this activity in my own account, and it wouldn't be going anywhere. And I could also save specific searches. So if this search number 4 was my favorite, and I don't want to, I'm not interested in rehashing all the other parts of this search, I can create an alert using my account. And I'm having a problem there. Sorry, one moment. There we go. So if I open up my account, there's something called a dashboard. And this is what it looks like. And this is where things like saved searches will go, and collections, which is when I've gathered different articles in a pile and move them over into a list, so I don't have to repeat my actions. Usually there is activity here that lets me know exactly all the different things I've done up until this point. The advantage is that I can walk away from this task and go right back into searching my terms that I've worked with so far and not have to redo this entire build. Towards saving the same amount of time, you're going to want to download your search history. That's going to come up in an Excel sheet. It's kind of clunky, but it's not as clunky as having to rework through all these combinations. Any other questions?
We have one more from Emma. Since you said controlled vocabulary lets you search the theme of a publication, what are the cases you'd consider using keywords?
Great question. So both keywords and subject headings or controlled vocab are important, and oftentimes you're going to find that you're combining them. So if we were using a subject heading, or we were searching in the subject headings and we simply were not finding terminology that was speaking to the topic at hand, we would go ahead and we would just use keywords, type them in the query box, and start off that way. And that actually brings to mind another strategy that I think is really useful when we're trying to find themes and keywords. I'm going to go back into my results, and I'm just going to pick one of these articles and show you. I'm going to navigate using this right-hand list and go to my mesh terms. So let's say I was getting articles about diabetes and I just used it as a keyword because I wasn't finding it as a subject heading. I could then use any article that was in the neighborhood of what I was trying to get at to find other mesh terms, even though I started off with a keyword. So I might look at it and say, oh, maybe sugars is important to the angle I'm taking, or maybe beverages, which is a much larger category than carbonated beverages. I might want to try combining with that to see if that broader list brings me things that I think would still apply. So when you're looking at your different results and your history, you begin to be able to take advantage of saving time because you're not going to have 800,000 results. When you have to stack things and initially isolate them in their own layer, you can judge terms whether they are helpful or not, narrow or too big or too broad. You can start doing things like putting in keywords and combining them using or with your other subject headings. The more you do this, the faster you'll get. I know it looks really tedious, but you'll actually start moving along quite quickly and move through combinations, letting you know which are fruitful and which are not. And the more you do it, the more confident you'll become in your searching. Any other questions?
All good so far.
Okay, great. So that is a very brief and surface level discussion about controlled vocabulary. And Emily, if you wouldn't mind putting this link in the chat.
Yep, no problem.
If everyone could take a moment and fill out this very brief evaluation form, that would be wonderful. And thanks for coming.